I will not allow the talking points of the Israeli military to become dominant of what happened on that day.
You know, you are
Palestinians are subject to a genocidal war. Collective punishment in Gaza is real.
Let me respond. You are the only pro-Palestinian person I've had on the show in 2 weeks who has tried to make out that this just didn't happen on October the 7th, or somehow was perpetrated by Israelis.
You are misrepresenting what I am saying.
Well, I've got two questions. They're very straightforward. Do you believe that 1,500 people were slaughtered, including 260 people at a music festival? You're a musician. And secondly, do you condemn the people who did it? They're not a difficult question.
I would like to quote something that you just said to the former spokesperson for the IDF. This was your exact sentence not long ago. You said, it's difficult to tell between combatants and non-combatants. So the implication of what you said was somehow it was understandable that Israel has killed a Palestinian child every 15 minutes in Gaza.
I didn't say that.
For the last... No, but somehow they couldn't tell that those children were not combatants, according to you.
No, I didn't say that.
It's understandable.
I didn't say that, and I have said that it is absolutely appalling, the number of children who are dying in Gaza. It's appalling, and it will get worse. I make no bones about that at all.
And I have to say... But
you have to start, surely, from a humanity point of view. I can absolutely express my horror at the deaths of Palestinian innocent civilians, as I have done many times over the years. I think it's horrifying. And I think this is why I have a serious problem with the proposed ground invasion, because I think it will create unbelievably large numbers of civilian casualties, and I'm not sure that the strategy will work. But I'm just curious why you, who is... I know you care about people. I know you care passionately about the Palestinian civilians, but you're the only pro-Palestine voice I've had who's even tried to suggest that what Hamas did on October the 7th was not as bad as we think. So is that what you think?
What do we think, Piers? The information is not clear. As I've said to you, all human life is sacred.
Hamas haven't even tried to hide it.
It's sacred. I'm not trying to hide anything. You're trying to hide something.
No, with respect, you are definitely trying to dissemble here, and I'll explain why. I've given you an opportunity to simply say whether you condemn what Hamas did, which, by the way, they have brazenly boasted about. They posted videos celebrating what they did. There is no doubt about what Hamas did. They want you to know what they did. They want me to know that. They want the world to know. They killed Jewish people in the main and in Israel with impunity. 260 people at a music festival. Babies, grandmothers, they kidnapped 200 people. God knows what's happened to them. Now, you can shake your head, but what you can't do is deny that that happened, because Hamas have admitted it brazenly and with great pride.
Stated,
and secondly, if they've admitted it, do you condemn what they did?
I absolutely mourn the loss of all human life in this conflict, and I have struggled for 15 years of my life in a way that, Piers, to be honest, you haven't, OK? And I take you as an empathetic person with a high level of emotional intelligence, OK? I have struggled for 15 years of my life to stop the killing, for a ceasefire now, to stop deaths. But I have to say, Piers, that actually this line of questioning, unfortunately, on a personal level, is somewhat hypocritical, and I'll explain why. On April 18th, 2022, you said the exact phrase that you feel like Nelson Mandela walking out of prison on the long road to freedom of speech. Today, there is a statue for Nelson Mandela outside Parliament. Now, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, Beit Salim, and even the Harvard Law School have said that Israel practices apartheid against the Palestinian people. Do you know what the ANC struggle against apartheid entailed? Are you aware that the ANC are believed to have very unfortunately, horrifically, and terribly taken the lives of children and civilians in their struggle against apartheid? So, Piers, you seem absolutely content to not only compare yourself to Nelson Mandela, who served 27 years in jail for what they described as terrorism at the time, but yet you cannot see what the vast majority of human rights organizations in the world see when they look at the Palestinians. When you look at UN Resolution 194, paragraph 11, the Palestinians have the right to return home. Almost a million of them were displaced in 1948 with the foundation of the State of Israel. And what we are now on the brink of is Palestinians, millions of them, being driven into the Sinai Desert with help of the US Delta Force,
yeah, but Lowkey,
help
let me
of
jump
the British.
Well, honestly, I didn't expect the framing that you put on this segment, and it's framing like that, that's disgusting. So I don't see what this has anything to do with anti-Semitism. I formed Young Turks and TYT with two Jewish friends who are some of my friends growing up. We've known each other and been brothers for over 40 years now. So I think what Hamas did is disgusting. I cry for those Israeli innocent civilians. But do I see you guys crying for Palestinians? I mean, Chris Christie was just on here treating it like it's no big deal because what, Palestinian lives don't matter? I think the real bigotry here is saying that Palestinians, we can kill 3 times as many of them already. And this is the appetizer. Netanyahu and his barbaric government have not even started the entree of murder and death and mayhem they're about to do. And that's somehow okay, killing 3 times as many Palestinian civilians, let alone the occupation, which is bigotry by definition. We say that everyone in the world can defend themselves, can have their own state, can have sovereignty, except the Palestinians. And the reasoning behind that is the Palestinians are what? They're what? The idea is that they are savages and that Muslims are too violent and cannot control themselves, so they must be occupied for 56 brutal, disgusting years. So I've had enough of the bigotry against Muslims and Palestinians, and I need you to speak out against that instead of covering every outrageous, atrocious action of the right-wing government of Israel and going, oh, it's anti-Semitism. No, and there is global anti-Semitism. There's anti-Semitism here in this country. 2 synagogues were shot up, Pittsburgh and in Southern California. We fight against that all the time. But then whenever Israel is criticized, people go, oh, no, it's anti-Semitism. No, there's real anti-Semitism.
Okay, Jack, let me respond.
Instead of attacking that, all you guys ever do is hide behind the veil of anti-Semitism. Do you know why Palestinians might not like Israelis? Because they've been oppressed for 56 straight years.
I hear you. And let me respond. A, I'm not you guys. I don't think I fit into any neat fit on this issue at all. B, I've actually covered this story, I think, more fairly than most people. I've had many pro-Palestinian voices I've given a huge platform for. They've been getting enormous audiences, from Bassem Youssef to others, and I've done that quite deliberately because I think these voices are important to be heard, including yours. I certainly wasn't accusing you, by the way, or your organisation of anti-Semitism. I have found it, as somebody who's always identified as liberal myself, I've found it very dispiriting to see people who call themselves liberals whose instant response, it seemed to me, to one of the worst terror attacks we've ever seen was to immediately side with the place where these attacks have been launched from. Now, I don't tar all Palestinians with the brush of being Hamas at all. And in fact, the sooner Hamas are out of there, the better for the Palestinian people and the world. But I just think the only human response you can have is, as you did, by the way, to your credit, is it was disgusting what happened on October the 7th. Now, the question then becomes, what is a proportionate response by Israel? Not just to the terror attacks of October the 7th, but obviously there is now a huge ongoing escalation in what has been, as you rightly say, a 56-year war, effectively, in varying degrees over that period. And that's where I think I'm struggling to see how a ground invasion by Israel, with all that would entail, particularly mass deaths of Palestinian civilians, how that is going to do anything for any peaceful resolution to this. I think it will have the opposite effect.
I'm not going to waste my time talking about the report with Clarissa, because this takes away from the point. You mentioned before there was a deadlock in the debate. There's no deadlock in the debate. There is terror in the debate. You are unable to debate with Israel because what's happened so far is we're witnessing the sick relationship between the United States and Israel. where basically the United States has given a permission for Israel to have genocide on ground. And what's happened is we're seeing no one can say no to Israel. The United Nations isn't able to say no to Israel without repercussions. Media figures aren't able to say no to Israel without repercussions. So what ends up happening is that you're basically raising a spoiled brat you're unable to say no to, that has now grown up to be a sociopath. And let me reiterate that the relationship between the United States and Israel is putting the world in jeopardy. So what we're witnessing now is a serious issue where both parties need to reassess their relationship. I understand that Biden, because he's pitted his own people against each other and wasted billions of dollars giving them to Israel instead of looking at his own homeless, his own medical care issue, his own student loans issue. So a lot of American people are also extremely angry, and they're also looking at unfair coverage. The reason this video has gone so viral, one, it's alarming that it's gone so viral, because what should be going viral is the footage that we are witnessing out of Palestine, out of the occupied territories, of children being massacred. It's not a war. A war assumes that both parties are on equal footing.
Okay, I hear you. What I would say in response to that is that on October the 7th, Hamas, who are the ruling authority in Gaza, committed an act of such heinous terrorism, killing 1,500 people, including 260 people at a music festival.
In 1948,
let me finish, Rahma. Let me finish.
What happened
let me just
then?
ask,
what about the militia?
Rahma, let me just ask you the question. No, you have to let me ask a question. I've been very polite to you and respectful. I've let you have your say. I'm going to say something now to you, and you can respond.
Bear in mind there's a delay, so this isn't exactly the easiest debate to have.
Well, that's why I said at the start, why don't we let me ask questions, you answer them, and that's the way this can proceed in a respectful manner. I would simply say to you that I've had a number of pro-Palestinian voices on this program in the last 2 weeks, and a number of pro-Israel voices. Many of the pro-Palestinian people I've had on have been very quick to condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th. Some have not. What's your position? Before we get to what you just said to me about what Israel has done and what America's doing and so on, what is your view as someone in Egypt about what happened right on your border there in Gaza by Hamas against Israel?
It's a very fair question. But the thing is, maybe I have a privilege being so close to the border, having many Palestinian friends, knowing more history, that I understand that once you oppress a people, and again, I'm not justifying what happened. The killing of civilians on both parts ought to be condemned. But the danger in you starting an interview asking me to condemn Hamas, then pours into Israel's blind defense of its own state, which ends up killing over 5,000 Palestinians, over 700 dead. And going back to the report that you were discussing at the beginning with the CNN reporter, the issue with that is everything is always taken out of context. And this is the issue we have with Western media. Had the journalist been there on ground with the volunteers that night, as for example I was, she would have listened to the bombardment of Israeli bombs that start from 2:30 a.m. and do not stop. She would have also witnessed the fact that we would get an okay from Israel's side. I'm not done. From Israel's side, that the supplies would go in, and then it's like they toy with your morale so that for hope from both sides is stopped. The narrative has got to change.
Okay,
the idea. I, for example, I don't have the PR of Israel. I don't have the money to hire the Justin Biebers of the world and have them say pray for Israel and whatnot. But what I do have is the truth. And the reason this video has gone so viral is because people felt it.
I just want to ask you a question. So last we left it, you did refuse to condemn Hamas murdering Israelis on October 7th, and it seems as if nothing has changed. But I couldn't help but to think, do you condemn 9/11?
That's such a ridiculous
It's a yes
question.
or no.
This
It's
is
yes
an
or no.
interrogation
It's
of
yes
I'm a
or
New
no.
York citizen.
Well, actually, it's a
It's yes
simple
or no.
question.
Of course. No. It's a, of
Can
course.
you stop deflecting
of course.
questions?
She said
But
of
it's
course.
ridiculous.
So what
I said of course.
what is the
It's not a
difference
deflection.
between Israel's 9/11?
I'm not here to. Is she the
It's a
interviewer or
question.
are you?
Actually,
It's
she's
a
raising. I
question.
think the point she's making, unless I'm wrong, is if you condemn that, why won't you condemn what
Because
happened?
that was
on October
Israel's
7th?
9/11.
I'm not here to answer her questions because
Can you ask her that
Palestinians
for
are
me?
the
Let
only
me.
people
Well, we did this
on
last
earth.
week. I will now ask
Yeah.
what Emily just asked because it's actually a valid question.
It's Israel's 9/11.
If you're happy to publicly condemn 9/11, why are you not happy to condemn Israel's 9/11? In fact, it was a lot worse statistically.
9/11 is Palestine's 24/7.
That's completely,
Let me bring in Louise.
absurd.
Let me bring in Louise here.
I found it really shocking. I have to say that your organisation within our lifetime said that it was an act of resistance on October the 7th. I mean, that is the most un-Islamic thing I've ever heard in my life. Tying the hands of little children behind them, covering them in petrol and then burning them alive. Please tell me, what is resistance about such inhumane torture of kids?
Since you want to bring up Islam, in Islam we believe that the bloodshed of any innocent person is equal to killing all of humanity. And this is something that, we believe. Unfortunately, Palestinians are put in a situation where they're in an open-air prison. What we were celebrating that day is them breaking out of that open-air prison. I don't understand how the world expects
It's one
to
of the
lock
reasons.
people.
It's one of the reasons why you're not so keen to condemn what Hamas did on October the 7th, because you're fearful of publicly doing that. Are all Palestinians fearful of speaking out against Hamas, actually? Because there's a very good reason to be fearful.
No, there's no reason to be fearful. My life is not, if anything, living in New York City my whole life, there are many Zionist institutions, including the universities that I attended, and campaigns against me for being pro-Palestinian, including putting my face on trucks to drive around Midtown and Times Square for 2 weeks just this summer, calling me a jihadi. So that's what I'm fearful of.
It's not because you're pro-Palestine, it's because you're pro-murder. There's a big difference.
Absolutely.
We are all pro-Palestinian liberation from a terrorist group called Hamas. Apparently everyone here but you.
What about from the
Apparently
occupation? Are you pro-Palestinian liberation from the occupation, the siege, and the blockade?
You want to talk about
occupation? You keep asking me questions.
I am asking
but you're
you questions
changing the
because you're
topic the one time I ask you a question.
You're pro-murder.
All right.
Jordan is part
I'll tell you what, Emily, I'll allow that. You have asked her a question. She can ask you one.
Go ahead.
Go on.
I just asked, do you support Palestinian liberation from the siege
Hamas.
and blockade and the
no siege and
occupation?
blockade.
That's factually incorrect. How can I talk to somebody who doesn't even accept basic
The United
facts?
Nations partition plan divided the land. You waged a war. You
What does
lost
that have
it.
to do with the fact that there's a